Sup guys, I'm Kel, Red Zone MTG, and welcome to a EDH deck strategy video. So this video I'm going to be covering the Maelstrom Wanderer. This is actually one of my pet decks. Disclaimer here, this is not a budget deck. This is a personal deck of mine that I've spent a lot of work and a lot of time on. It's actually probably one of the most expensive decks that I own, but keep that in mind as we go over it. There could be some budget options for various cards in the deck. But yeah, without further ado, let's talk about the deck. So before we go into the deck prime, let's talk about the commander, Maelstrom Wanderer. He is an 8-drop. He costs 5, a blue, red, and a green. He is an elemental. Creatures you control have haste, which is actually really cool. And he has Cascade, Cascade. So you get a Cascade twice. And for this video, I'm not going to go really deep into the mechanics of every single card. It's going to take a very long time. But he has a 7/5, which is really good. Being able to kill your opponent in 3 hits with commander damage is excellent, and the fact that he costs 8 means you can cascade into cards that cost 7 or less, which is really good. So we're going to be playing a lot of high drop cards, some low drop cards to help, get up to this 8 cost. There's a lot of like big, dumb, fun stuff in this deck. There's not a lot of combo stuff. This isn't your like standard just combo Maelstrom Wanderer, just try to assemble a combo and combo kill the whole table. Now, I'm not really all about that, though there is one combo kill in the deck that we can do if things get a little hairy, if things get out of hand, or if the game is like, 2 hours long. Let's start going over the deck proper. So, first up we have my Planeswalker package. I know Planeswalkers aren't really super good in EDH, but I think they're really fun. And they create some pretty cool interactions and kind of force your opponent to decide whether they want to attack you, if they want to attack a Planeswalker, if they want to ignore you, so you can use your Planeswalker's abilities on your opponent's other stuff, like your opponent's of your opponent's other stuff, I should say. First off, we have Jace the Mind Sculptor. I mean, he's just a fantastic card. He's actually really good in Maelstrom Wanderer because his 0 ability is basically Brainstorm. Draw 3 cards, put 2 cards from your hand on top of your deck in any order, so you can put stuff on top of your deck to cascade into with Maelstrom Wanderer, which is sweet. So Jace is a very good card in this deck in particular. Next up we have good old Dak Faden, greatest thief in the multiverse. He's in Japanese, so if you can't read it, his +1 is you draw 2 cards and discard 2 cards. His -2 is you get to steal a artifact, and his -6 doesn't really matter because we're never going to get to 6. Alright, so his -6 is you get an emblem with whenever you cast a spell that targets 1 or more permanents, gain control of those permanents. Like I said, we're not really going to get there. We're not running doubling season or anything like that, but it could come up every now and then if your opponents completely ignore you. After that, we have Chandra, Torch of Defiance. She's pretty sweet. She basically lets you draw cards, sort of. She ramps you a bit, which is actually really good. That's probably the thing I use the most with her. She can kill medium-sized creatures, which is sweet. And she has this also ultimate ability that we'll never get to. Most of the time, it's like, draw a card, ramp a little bit, maybe kill something that's really pesky. But I think she's a really good inclusion in the deck. And I think she's just a lot of fun. That's kind of the theme of this deck. Having fun. Next up, we have Garruk Wildspeaker. Kind of like Chandra, ramps us 2 with the +1 ability, untapping 2 lands. We can create beasts. We can give our dudes, overrun. But most of the time, we're just going to be untapping some lands. Next up, we have Karn Liberated. And, well, Karn is just really good. You can make your opponent exile cards from their hand. You can exile permanents, which is good with this deck because we don't have a whole lot of removal. And we have this good old -14 to restart the game thing, which we're not really going to do. Most of the time, it's going to be the top 2 abilities, and then he's going to die. But it's just a really good inclusion in the deck. And you can cascade into him with Maelstrom Wanderer because he costs 7. You cannot cascade into Ugin, the Spirit Dragon, or Eugene. But he's also just a really good board wipe ability. And we're going to be ramping quite a bit, so 8 isn't too bad. The +2 almost is never used, but it can use it here and there. Most of the time we just drop Ugin with the intent of the -X. And then of course there's this -10, which also never happens. So next up I'm going to go over my Woodland Bellower package. That's right, I have a Woodland Bellower package in this deck. Basically Woodland Bellower and non-legendary green dudes that cost 3 or less. So specifically, Woodland Bellower is a 6/5. If you don't know what he does, I'll read it because it's kind of important for this. When he enters the field, you can search your deck for a non-legendary green creature with converted mana cost 3 or less and then put it onto the battlefield. Then you shuffle. So basically you get a tutor for a green 3-drop or less non-legendary. Non-legendary is important, but yeah, so he's kind of like, we got this toolbox here. So Woodland Bellower can go get us Wood Elves, just a fantastic ramp card. Go and search it for a forest when it comes into play. Pretty good. It can get us Rex Sage, which is also really good. Versatile card, lets us blow up an artifact or an enchantment when it comes into play. We can also get our Eternal Witness, which just lets us get any card back from the graveyard. You know, Eternal Witness is basically a staple in Commander, so you probably already know what it does. And then finally, it lets us get Shaman of the Forgotten Ways, and this card is actually pretty hilarious. If you don't know what he does, I'll read what he does because he's, you know, kind of in Japanese. You can tap him to add 2 mana of any combination of colors to your mana pool. You can spend this only to play creatures. And then he has this big Biorhythm ability on the bottom. This, you know, 11 mana, 9 of any, 2 green. You can tap him, and it's formidable. So you can only do this if you control creatures with total power 8 or greater, which isn't too hard with, you know, our 7 power commander. And it says each player's life total becomes the number of creatures he or she controls. Yeah. So if you have, your opponents are playing some weird combo deck with no creatures, this just kills them, which is hilarious. I've actually killed Atraxa Super Friends decks with this. I have a bunch of Super Friends out, and you know, I play this off of Maelstrom Wanderer. He has haste, tap 9, your life total becomes 0 because you have no freaking creatures. All you have is planeswalkers. So yeah, this card's hilarious, and it combos pretty well with Avenger of Zendikar, which we're also running in the deck. So we can, you know, our life total doesn't hurt too bad when using it in conjunction with certain cards. Next, I have the infinite combo of the deck, Kiki-Jiki Mirror Breaker and Zealous Conscripts. You may be familiar with this combination already. Basically, Kiki-Jiki copies Zealous Conscripts, which untaps Kiki-Jiki, which you can tap him to copy Zealous Conscripts, which will untap Kiki-Jiki, and just make a flood of Zealous Conscript tokens. When you make the copy of the Zealous Conscripts, you always target your Kiki-Jiki to untap him. Other than that, though, with infinite combo aside, Kiki-Jiki is just really sweet in copying our big fatties like our Wormcoil Engines and our big old Titans that we're playing. And Zealous Conscripts is just a really sweet card because you can gain control. I can speak of permanents that your opponents control. So you can steal their Planeswalkers and Ultimate. You can steal their I don't know, Darksteel Forges for the turn. You can do a whole bunch of crazy shit with Zealous Conscripts. You don't have to use these for the combo kill. Most of the time I don't, but if things get out of hand, it's nice to know that I have a way to just win the game on the spot. Speaking of big fatties, I have my Wormcoil Engine. Pretty self-explanatory. 6-drop, 6/6, Death Touch, a lifelink. When he dies, you get a Death Touch guy and a lifelink guy. Yeah, pretty good. It's just a really fun card, one of my favorite cards ever printed, and just kind of a no-brainer for, well, it's not really a no-brainer, but I think it's a really cool inclusion in Maelstrom Wanderer. You can cascade into it, and there's some replication abilities that we can do on Wormcoil Engine to give us a shitload of Wormcoil Engines, which is sweet. Next up is Avenger of Zendikar. He's kind of almost a combo creature, but he's also like got an army in a can kind of ability. He's a 5/5. When he enters the field, you get a 0/1 plant for each land you control, and he has a landfall of, you get +1/+1 counter on all your plants. He's a 7-drop, so he's a perfect, you know, the perfect sweet spot for Maelstrom Wanderer. And he also synergizes very well with other cards like Pathbreaker Ibex. 3/3, when it attacks, creatures you control gain trample and XX until XX until end of turn, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. So if you cascade into Pathbreaker Ibex off of Maelstrom Wanderer, it'll have haste because Wanderer has haste, or Wanderer gives everything haste, and you can attack, and then everything will get +7/+7 because Maelstrom Wanderer has 7 attack. So this is really sweet. I used to have Craterhoof Behemoth in this deck, but he costs more than the 7 sweet spot that we need for this deck, so you can't really cascade into Craterhoof Behemoth, but you can cascade into Pathbreaker Ibex. Next up, we have a bunch of value cards that also let us put stuff on the top of the deck. These are all crucial for Maelstrom Wanderer, in my opinion. They're also all in Japanese, so I apologize if you don't know what they do. This is Sylvan Library, Sensei's Divining Top, and Scroll Rack. This one basically lets you draw an additional 2 cards per turn, and you lose 4 life for each card that you want to draw. You don't have to draw them, and you can put them back in any order. It's kind of a complicated card. There are many English versions of this, and this sees a lot of play, so you probably already know what Sylvan Library does. Sensei's Divining Top, also a very similar situation, but it's also a good way to rearrange the top cards of your deck, so you can cascade into sweet stuff with Maelstrom Wanderer. Same thing is true for Sylvan Library. It lets you kind of sort of rearrange the top cards of your deck. And then Scroll Rack is kind of the epitome of that. Basically what you do is you set a number of cards in your hand aside, and then you draw cards from the top of your deck that's equal to that number, and then you put the cards that you set aside on top of your deck. So you basically swap cards with the top of your deck with cards in your hand, and if there's something really sweet that you want to cascade into in your hand, you can put it, you know, on top of your deck, which is good. And Scroll Rack only costs 1 and a tap to activate. Very, very good card in this deck, though it's, you know, kind of expensive for what it is. So next up I have my Stealing Shit bundle, not to be confused with my Cloning Shit bundle. Basically what these cards do is they let me steal my opponent's stuff, they let me steal my opponent's spells, they let me steal my opponent's creatures. Treachery is just a fantastic control magic. Gain control of a dude, and you untap 5 lands, so it's basically like a free control magic type card. Bribery lets you search your opponent's deck for any creature, and you put it on the field, which is amazing. This is Knowledge Exploitation. It basically does the exact same thing as Bribery, except for instants and sorcery, so you could search your opponent's deck for an instant and sorcery, and you get to play it for free. It also has this Prowl cost, but we don't really care about that because we don't have any rogues in the deck. Next up we have Spell Twine, which is sweet. You get to exile an instant or sorcery card from your graveyard, and one from an opponent's graveyard, and then you get to cast both of those for free, which is really, really sweet. Yeah, not much else to say. Spell Twine is awesome. Diluvian Primordial, pretty close to Spell Twine. When it enters the field, for each opponent, you can choose up to 1 target instant or sorcery spell from their graveyards, and then you exile them, and then you get to cast them for free. So if they have some sweet value cards, some sweet draw spells, even removal spells, you just get to play them for each opponent you have, which is awesome. Also, he's a 5/5 flyer, which not too bad. And then Mind's Dilation, which is one of my favorite newer cards, is a 7-drop enchantment. So it's a big old enchantment. But it says, whenever an opponent casts his or her first spell each turn, that player exiles the top card of his or her library. If it's a non-land card, you may cast it without paying its mana cost. That is so sweet. So yeah, just stealing your opponent's stuff is a lot of fun, especially when you hit something sweet off it, like a Blightsteel Colossus or something. Green Warden Omarosa is also a really good value engine. So it's 5/4. When he enters the battlefield, you can return target card from your graveyard to your hand. So he basically eat witnesses when he enters the field, and when he dies, you can exile it, and if you do, you also get another card back from your graveyard to your hand. So pretty sweet. You get 2 cards back for the price of 1. Yeah, not much else to say. This is a really sweet card. The 6 casting cost isn't too big of a deal when you're cascading into it. Next up, we have a big card drop package. Rhystic Study is, you know, pretty popular in Commander, so that one kind of goes without further explanation. Same with Consecrated Sphinx. Anytime your opponent draws a card, you can draw 2 cards. Just kind of a staple in Commander. Guided Passage, however, is awesome. So for 1 temur, so blue, red, and green, you reveal all the cards in your library. Then opponent chooses from among them a creature, a land, a non-creature, a non-land, and then you put all the cards in your hand and then shuffle your library. So it's really sweet. You're just kind of like, here's my deck, give me some stuff. And yeah, it's basically like a draw 4, but with some kind of like political implications. You're like, hey, yo, I need a removal spell so we can get rid of that dude's stuff. So you can get something sweet with Guided Passage. I really like this card a lot. Then obviously we have a Fact or Fiction, just a staple of Magic in general. Rishkar's Expertise, which is another new inclusion into the deck. I think it's awesome. You draw cards equal to the greatest power among creatures you control. So if you cascade into this off a Maelstrom Wanderer, could be 7. And then you can cast a card with converted mana cost 5 or less from your hand without paying its cost. So this is an incredibly good card to cascade into. You get a lot of value, and then you get to play another card from your hand. And then we have Recurring Insight, which is, once again, another great value card that probably should see more play in Commander than it does. You draw cards equal to the number of cards in an opponent's hand, then has Rebound. So you just gotta draw a shitload of cards. And next up we have my Clone package. Rite of Replication copies a dude, and then if you kicker it, you get to copy 5 of those dudes, so copying 5 Wormcoil Engines is pretty crazy. Then we have Phyrexian Metamorph. This is a recent addition to the deck. I swapped some stuff out, but I think Phyrexian Metamorph is a really good card. He copies a creature or an artifact. Just fantastic for only 3 mana and 2 life. Pretty good. Clever Impersonator copies anything, which is awesome. Just whatever you need in the situation. Copy a big dude. Copy their Darksteel Forge. I don't know why I keep talking about Darksteel Forge today, but yeah, a lot of versatility there. Basically, you copy a dude, and then you get an additional token copy of that dude every single turn. Or on your turn. Every single one of your turns, I should say, because this is Commander. Progenitor Mimic is awesome, and it's busted. And I've had a lot of people groan when I play this card. Here we have my tutor package. Defense of the Heart is criminally underplayed and pretty fucking broken, actually. It's a 4-drop enchantment, 3 of any and 1 green. During your upkeep, if one of your opponents controls 3 or more creatures, not 3 or more creatures than you, just 3 or more creatures, sacrifice Defense of the Heart, search your library for any 2 creature cards, and put those into play.
then shuffle your library. So you can win on the spot if you want to with this card. You can go get your Zealous Conscripts and Kiki Jiki. You can get Pathbreaker Ibex and Avenger of Zendikar. You can get a lot of stuff. Defense of the Heart is absolutely busted. Why is this not banned? I don't know. It's crazy good. Then we have our two tutors, Worldly Tutor and Mystical Tutor. One searches for a creature, one searches for an instant or sorcery, and you put them on top of your deck. That's actually really, really good with Maelstrom Wanderer because we are cascading. So putting stuff on the top of your deck is, you know, sometimes where you want them to be. And then finally, Tooth and Nail, kind of like a more expensive version of Defense of the Heart, but it's a little more like you don't have to wait till your opponent has 3 or more dudes. So yeah, Tooth and Nail is just obviously a good inclusion, and you can still play it off of Maelstrom Wanderer. You don't get the Entwine, but you do get that cost. Next up, we have the removal package of the deck. Starting off with one of the biggest grown test cards in the entire game, we have Cyclonic Rift. I don't really have to say much about it. It's Cyclonic Rift. It's just so good that you probably should be running it, unless your playgroup specifically says like, yo, don't run Cyclonic Rift. Next up, I have Chaos Warp. I love Chaos Warp. You can Chaos Warp your own stuff. You can Chaos Warp your opponent's stuff. It's just a good spot removal card and just a really fun card in general, which is why I love running it. Also, we have Inferno Titan. Doing stuff like Rite of Replication on Inferno Titan is hilarious, and it's just a really cool card. It's not like busted or anything, but it's a lot of fun. Being able to deal just a bunch of damage, especially off of Maelstrom Wanderer. So you can, if you cascade into Inferno Titan, you play him, you do the 3 damage divided any way you choose, and you can attack with him, which is another 3 damage any way you choose, on top of the 6 damage from his attack. So if your opponent has no blockers, it's like 12 damage off of Inferno Titan. That's not insignificant. Next I have Balefire Dragon. This card has actually gone up quite a bit in recent years, probably because it hasn't seen any printings. It's a 6/6/4/7, which is kind of a lot. But whenever he deals combat damage to a player, he deals that much damage to each creature that player controls, which is fucking hilarious. I love this card. I love this card so much. It's just kind of like a sweet board wipe card, and but it's kind of like different. You know, it's not like a Blasphemous Act where you just get it. You gotta actually like punch your opponent with it. But I like Balefire Dragon quite a bit. Also has like really sweet art. And then finally we have Bane of Progress, which is another pretty well-known staple for Commander, I think. 2/2 enters the field, blow up all artifacts and enchantments, and he gets a 1/1 counter for each one destroyed. It's a 6-drop, but doesn't really matter in this deck. We have a lot of ramp, and we can cascade into him. Here is my counterspell package for the deck. I don't run a whole lot of counterspells, just because it's pretty shitty cascading into a counterspell. But the counterspells I do have are not too bad to cascade into, except for Mana Drain. I don't really want to cascade into Mana Drain, even though that I can, get some mana back off of it. You don't really want to cascade into it. This is the one card in the deck you don't want to cascade into. But other than that, it's still a fantastic card and it helps you play Maelstrom Wanderer earlier than you'd be able to. I mean, it's Mana Drain. You know it, you love it, or you hate it. Cryptic Command, very similar. What I like about Cryptic Command, Mystic Confluence, and Spelljack is that these cards are all really good to cascade into because they have alternate modes, or they have kind of like tricky situations. So Cryptic Command, instead of countering a spell, you can like tap all creatures your opponents control and draw a dude, or draw a card, or you can bounce a dude. So yeah, Cryptic Command, really good, obviously. Mystic Confluence, same type deal. You can draw 3 cards, you can bounce some dudes, you don't have to use it to counter spells. And then Spelljack is a really sweet card for Maelstrom Wanderer. It says counter target spell. If it's countered this way, remove it from the game instead of putting it into its owner's library. As long as it remains removed from the game, you may play it as though it were in your hand without paying its mana cost. If it has X and its cost, X is 0. So basically, when you cascade into this, you counter your Maelstrom Wanderer, and then you get to play it again and get 2 more cast triggers. That's awesome. Super awesome. And by cast triggers, I mean cascade triggers. Alright, and the last chunk of the main deck is ramp. We got a lot of ramp, so I'm going to go through this pretty quickly. I mean, Solemn Simulacrum, we're actually running a decent amount of basics, so playing Solemn isn't too bad, and, drawing cards when he dies, really good. Oracle Moldiah is a fantastic card. 2/2. You can play an additional land on your turn, you play the top card of your library revealed, and you can play lands from the top of your library. Just a fantastic card. One thing of note, I used to have a foil one. Well, obviously this is a foil one, but I had a foil one back when Zendikar came out, and I remember selling it for like $5. It was a really fucking stupid mistake. Anyway, we have Mana Crypt. It's Mana Crypt. It's a 0-cost 2-mana ramp spell. Pretty crazy. We also have Soul Ring. Once again, It's a fucking Soul Ring. One thing to note, French Soul Ring is a Solaire, N.O. Solaire. I would love to get this altered to have like Solaire from Dark Souls on it. That'd be cool. Next we have Mana Vault. And I think this is a little bit less known than some of the other ones, but it's still pretty well known. 1 drop, you tap it to add 3 colors to manage your mana pool. You can pay 4 to untap it, and if you don't, you take some damage. Chromatic Lantern, also another like ubiquitous card with Commander. Just kind of a no-brainer, especially with the 3-color deck. Coalition Relic, same type deal. Just a really good mana rock. Helps you ramp, helps you fix colors. Yeah, not much else to say. Gilded Lotus, same type deal. The only downside of Gilded Lotus is that you have to choose a specific color, but when your general costs 8 to play, then 3, not that big of a deal. Plus we have a lot of other mana fixing with cards like these. Next we have Cultivate. It's Cultivate. You get some lands. And then we have Kodama's Reach. It's Cultivate. Now we have Tempt with Discovery. I really like this card a lot because it lets you get any land, and then your opponents can go get lands too. A lot of the times they'll get strip mines to like blow up the lands that you get, but sometimes they don't. So you can get really cool stuff with Tempt with Discovery. Just be careful that you don't give your opponents like, Cabal Coffers and Urborg kind of stuff. And finally we have the mana base. Let's just go over the basics. I run a single basic mountain, a couple basic islands, as in 4, and then an additional 5 forests. So we run a decent amount of basics, enough that we can get from the search things that we have, but not too much because we need fixing for this deck. We're playing like fast and loose with a lot of the colors. And finally we have our big old stack of lands. So we're just gonna go over these pretty quick, especially cards like Command Tower are no-brainers. Frontier Bivouac, also no-brainer. Having come into play taps is kind of a bummer, but I'll take it. Misty Rainforest, Scowling Tarn, and Wooded Foothills are our on-color fetches. I'm not playing any of the off-color fetches because I don't really give a shit about deck thinning and stuff like that. And then we also have our on-color shocks, also pretty standard. And I'm not running any of the ABU duels because honestly, I don't have very many ABU duels, and I don't really feel the need to run them in this deck. We have Flooded Grove, which is a good old filter land. We have Grove of the Burn Willows. I was gonna say Grove of the Boon Willows. That is incorrect. That is Grove of the Burn Willows. It's a great card. Who cares if your opponent's gained 1 life? It's Commander. You have Maya Coast, and this is Shivon Reef. Both of these Pain lands. I run Grove of the Burn Willows instead of the other Pain land, just because I think it's a little bit better. I'd rather your opponents gain life than me take damage. Then I have these, what are these called? Fast lands? Tap lands? Quick lands? I have these guys. Pretty standard stuff. Then I have 1 of each of the temples. Once again, they come into play tapped, but we get a Scry, and Scrying is really good with Maelstrom Wanderer. It's actually better than most decks because, if there's something bad that we don't want to cascade into, like a mana drain, we can put on the bottom before playing our Maelstrom Wanderer. Then I also have 1 of each of all of the on-color dual manlands. Lumbering Falls, Wandering Fumarole, and Raging Ravine. These are pretty good. They can come up every now and then. If your opponents keep wiping the board, then you can still have some dudes to attack and block with. Then we have our Strip Mine. It's Strip Mine. Blow up a land. Then we have Wasteland. It's Wasteland. Blow up another land. Except this time it has to be non-basic. Then we have Ancient Tomb. Really good ramp land. I definitely run this over something like Temple of the False God because we really want to hit our early drops. And, Maelstrom Wanderer, 8-drop. We got to get the ramp. Mirror Pool, which is actually a pet card of mine. I love this card. I jam it in a lot of my decks, even triple color decks. I don't care. We actually have a lot of ways to add colorless mana to our mana pool. So these activated abilities aren't too bad. If you don't know what Mirror Pool does, well, it comes into play tapped. You can add it, you tap it to add a 1 colorless. And you can pay 2 of any and a colorless and tap and sack to copy an instant or sorcery spell. It has to be one that you control, but that's still really sweet. Or you can pay 4 of any and a colorless and tap it and sack it to put a token copy of a creature you control. It's really sweet. I love Mirror Pool. Mirror Pool is awesome. Then we have Ye Old Command Beacon. Really good with Maelstrom Wanderer because sometimes he gets up there. He starts costing quite a bit, so getting Command Beacon and being able to cast him for his original casting cost is pretty good. We also have Reliquary Tower. We're going to be drawing a lot of cards. Riskkar's Expertise and some of the other cards just let us draw way too much. Well, there's no such thing as way too much, which is why we're playing Reliquary Tower. Homeward Path is kind of a non-bow with some of the stuff we have, but I just had to include this because I don't like my stuff getting stolen either. So it's a give and take with Homeward Path. You can cut it if you're a little bit afraid of your opponents somehow using it against you. And then finally, Kessig Wolf Run. This just gives your dudes trample. Well, gives one of your dudes trample. And Maelstrom Wanderer does not have trample by himself, so being able to give him trample and crush over your opponent for some commander damage is always good. And there you guys have it. That was my Maelstrom Wanderer Commander deck tech. I hope you guys liked it. I hope you guys thought it was fun showing you a personal deck of mine, something that I've spent some time searching out and finding some hard to find foils and just kind of making it my own thing. And that's what I love about Commander. It's a format where you can play cards that you just really like, cards that they don't see a lot of play elsewhere, and cards that you can just play just for the hell of it, not just because everyone else is playing them. Let me know if you guys like this video. I do have a lot more Commander decks I can cover. I have at least 6 other ones just sitting here that I can cover, and I can always build more Commander decks. I love talking about Commander. It is my favorite format in Magic the Gathering, and if videos like this get some traction, maybe I will make more of them. Anyway, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps my channel. My channel is very, very small right now, especially this Red Zone MTG channel. I do have another channel where I talk about other card games, but Red Zone MTG is fucking tiny, and it could use all the help that it could get. Thank you guys for watching, and I hope to see you next time.